Something has changed with Robbie Wolfe, and fans have been quick to notice. Ever since he stepped into the spotlight to replace Frank Fritz on American Pickers, the reaction has been intense. Loyal viewers who once celebrated every dusty barn find have now turned skeptical, even angry. But what exactly happened to Robbie Wolfe? Why has his rise sparked so much backlash? Let's pull back the curtain and trace how a beloved show turned into a battleground of controversy, loyalty, and heartbreak. When American Pickers first debuted, it was more than just a reality show. It was a celebration of friendship and history. For years, Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz crisscrossed the country, hunting down forgotten relics, telling stories about the past, and sharing a bond that felt as authentic as the treasures they uncovered. Their playful teasing, shared excitement, and genuine curiosity made viewers feel like part of their road trips. But as time passed, something shifted. Slowly, viewers began to see less of Frank and more of Mike's brother, Robbie. At first, it seemed harmless, just a family cameo. But then, Robbie's appearances grew more frequent, while Frank's dwindled, until eventually, Robbie was front and center. The transition wasn't smooth. Some fans liked seeing another Wolfe on screen, believing it added continuity and family charm. Others saw it differently, accusing the producers and even Mike himself of nepotism. The easy chemistry between Mike and Frank was gone, and in its place was an awkward tension that many felt could never be replicated. Ratings began to dip, and almost instantly, Robbie became the symbol of everything fans thought had gone wrong with the show. But was he really to blame? To understand that, we have to rewind to when this whole storm began. It started in 2020, when Frank Fritz suddenly disappeared from American Pickers. For fans, his absence was like losing an old friend. No goodbye episode, no clear explanation, just silence. People wondered what had happened. Frank had been there since day one, the yin to Mike's yang. Viewers waited week after week for his return, convinced it was only temporary. But the shocking truth came later. Frank wouldn't be coming back. Ever. That revelation hit the fan base like a punch to the gut. For many, the show without Frank simply didn't feel right. The official story was that Frank had health issues and needed time to recover. And indeed, he'd been struggling with severe back problems. Years of lifting heavy antiques and constant travel had taken a toll. The pain became unbearable, forcing him to undergo surgery. It was during that difficult recovery that Frank's life took a darker turn. According to Mike Wolfe, Frank had been prescribed pain medication to help manage the pain, and those medications became an addiction. Mike claimed that the addiction spiraled, changing Frank's behavior and straining their friendship. Soon, the two who once laughed on camera barely spoke off it. Mike even said he'd staged an intervention, but Frank resisted. It seemed like their brotherhood, once so unbreakable, was quietly falling apart. As Frank's situation worsened, the production team faced a dilemma. The show couldn't just stop, and someone needed to fill the empty seat beside Mike. Enter Robbie Wolfe. To the producers, it seemed like a natural solution. He already knew the format, had appeared occasionally, and was, of course, Mike's real brother. But that decision would soon come back to haunt them. As Robbie settled into his new role, the audience reaction was immediate, and not in a good way. To many, it felt like a betrayal of Frank's legacy. The show that once felt grounded in friendship and authenticity now seemed like a family takeover. Viewers vented online, blaming Robbie for the declining ratings and calling for Frank's return, even though that door had already closed. But the outrage didn't stop there. Fans began turning their anger toward Mike as well. They accused him of abandoning Frank when he needed help most. They questioned why Mike stayed silent for so long, only to talk about Frank's supposed addiction after his departure. To some, it felt like Mike was rewriting history to protect himself and the show's image. Comments flooded social media. "You replaced your friend with your brother. You threw Frank under the bus. And this isn't American Pickers anymore." The emotional backlash was massive, and Robbie found himself at the center of a storm he didn't create. Still, there was another side to the story, Frank's side. In a rare interview, Frank Fritz admitted to having struggled with alcohol, not opioids. He was open about his drinking problem, explaining how he'd checked into rehab in Iowa for 77 days and managed to stay sober for nearly a year. His honesty won over many fans who appreciated his transparency. They believed that if he'd been battling opioid addiction, he would have said so himself. Instead, they suspected something else was going on behind the scenes. Frank revealed that he and Mike hadn't spoken for nearly 2 years, not even during his surgery recovery. That revelation shocked fans. How could two men who'd built a show together and shared so much suddenly stop talking? Frank suggested that the friendship people saw on camera had quietly eroded long before his exit. He hinted at jealousy and tension, claiming that Mike wasn't happy about how popular Frank had become with audiences. According to Frank, he brought a relatable charm the everyman energy viewers loved. His humor, his storytelling, his way of finding value in the forgotten, it all resonated. When Frank lost weight and turned his health around, he noticed a change in Mike's attitude. "I think Mike wants to get his brother Robbie in there to replace me," Frank said bluntly. Those words spread quickly, and once fans heard them, the internet exploded. The idea that Frank was pushed out to make room for Mike's brother felt like a betrayal. To loyal viewers, American Pickers had always been about authenticity. Two friends traveling America's back roads, not about family favoritism or backstage politics. For Robbie, it was a nightmare introduction. No matter what he did, fans viewed him as the reason Frank was gone. They flooded the show's comment sections with anger, comparing the new episodes to watching an imitation. Even when Robbie tried to honor the same passion for history and collecting, many refused to give him a chance. Meanwhile, Mike Wolfe defended his decision. He said it was never about replacing Frank out of greed or jealousy. It was about saving the show from collapsing while his old friend battled personal demons. But by then, the damage was done. The more Mike spoke publicly, the worse things seemed to get. His comments about Frank's alleged addiction made him sound defensive, and fans accused him of exploiting a private struggle for sympathy. Instead of easing tension, his statements deepened the divide. For Robbie, there was no winning. He couldn't undo what fans believed, and the shadow of Frank Fritz loomed over every new episode. As months went by, Robbie's on-screen presence grew. His chemistry with Mike was different, more businesslike, less humorous, and while some appreciated his calm, knowledgeable approach, others missed Frank's rough-around-the-edges personality. Ratings continued to fluctuate, and social media filled with side-by-side comparisons. To many, the golden era of American Pickers had ended the moment Frank walked out the door. But the story wasn't finished. Just when fans thought they'd seen it all, tragedy struck, and it changed everything. In July 2022, everything changed when news broke that Frank Fritz had suffered a massive stroke. The man millions had grown up watching on American Pickers, the same Frank who brought laughter, history, and heart to every dusty barn and cluttered attic, was suddenly fighting for his life. The announcement stunned viewers. Online communities that had been divided over the show's direction suddenly united in heartbreak. Messages of support poured in, hashtags trended, and old clips of Frank's best moments resurfaced everywhere. For a brief moment, fans remembered why they'd loved the show in the first place, two friends chasing the stories behind forgotten treasures. Mike Wolfe released a statement, asking everyone to pray for my friend. To many, those words felt bittersweet. They were a reminder of the friendship that once existed, but had fallen apart in silence. For some fans, the plea for prayers came far too late. They wondered why Mike had waited until tragedy struck to speak so warmly of Frank. Others saw it as a sign that maybe there was still some love left between them. No matter which side you believed, one thing was clear. Frank's stroke changed everything. Frank fought hard to recover, but the road ahead was long and difficult. Doctors tried every possible therapy to help him regain his strength. Friends and family visited, encouraging him to hold on, but the cheerful, quick-witted Picker fans once knew was now a shadow of his former self. Frank's private battle stayed mostly out of the headlines, but every small update, every rumor of progress or setback, spread quickly among loyal viewers. Everyone wanted to believe he'd make it back to the open road, that somehow the old team would be reunited. But fate had other plans. On September 30th, 2024, Frank Fritz passed away at the age of 60. When the news broke, it felt like a piece of American Pickers history had died with him. The tributes came pouring in from fans, fellow collectors, and even rival shows. People shared stories about how Frank inspired them to look at old things differently, to see value where others saw junk. Mike Wolfe posted a heartfelt message calling Frank my friend and saying that the world had lost one of its true originals. But by then, emotions were too raw for comfort. Many fans accused Mike of hypocrisy, arguing that the man who had replaced Frank with his own brother was now trying to claim the spotlight of sympathy. Almost overnight, grief turned into outrage. Social media comment sections flooded with angry posts blaming Mike and Robbie for what had happened. Of course, neither man had anything to do with Frank's health struggles, but the internet doesn't always deal in fairness. To fans who'd never accepted Robbie's presence on the show, Frank's death became proof that something had gone terribly wrong. They revisited old interviews, dissected quotes, and reignited the debate. Was Frank pushed out to make room for Mike's family? Was Robbie's success built on Frank's downfall? Inside the production, things were far more complicated. Crew members later said that Robbie had never wanted to be the replacement. He had been part of the American Pickers world for years, helping behind the scenes, offering leads and occasionally appearing in early seasons. When Frank left, the producers needed someone dependable, someone who already understood the rhythm of the show. Robbie stepped in, not as a conqueror, but as a placeholder, someone trying to keep a long-running program alive. But perception is everything. From the first day he became a full-time co-host, Robbie faced an uphill battle. Viewers compared every moment of his screen time to Frank's. When he smiled, fans said it lacked Frank's humor. When he stayed quiet, they said he was dull. Even his good-natured personality was read as arrogance by some audiences who were simply unwilling to move on. For Robbie, it was a no-win situation. He was caught in the emotional crossfire between loyalty to his brother and the shadow of the man he'd replaced. Mike Wolfe, for his part, tried to navigate the backlash by emphasizing the show's message of history and preservation. He insisted that American Pickers was bigger than any one person, that it was about the stories behind the objects. He praised Robbie's work ethic, his knowledge, and his calm temperament. Yet every new season faced the same criticism. It's not the same without Frank. Viewership numbers reflected that sentiment. Ratings dipped, social media engagement fluctuated, and even longtime supporters admitted that the magic had changed. Meanwhile, Robbie chose a path of quiet professionalism. Unlike Mike, he didn't grant interviews or respond to critics online. Those close to him said he was heartbroken by how fans portrayed him. He had loved Frank, too. He'd known him for decades, long before the fame. Robbie focused on his other passion, music, continuing to perform with his band and running his restoration business. While the world argued about his motives, he simply kept doing the work he loved. In time, some viewers began to soften. They noticed Robbie's calm approach, his patience with sellers, and his genuine interest in Americana culture. Slowly, he started to earn a measure of respect from people who once refused to give him a chance. He wasn't trying to be Frank. He couldn't be. He was simply Robbie Wolfe, a man who happened to inherit a difficult legacy. And perhaps that's what made his role so complicated. But the weight of public opinion still lingered. For every fan who came around, there were others who refused to forgive what they saw as betrayal. Every social media post by Mike or the show was met with reminders of Frank. Even tributes to Frank's memory reignited the same painful conversations about loyalty and friendship. For many, the show's storyline had outgrown its television frame. It had become a reflection of something deeper, how fame, money, and personal choices can test even the strongest bonds. Behind the cameras, both brothers felt that pressure. Mike knew that every episode he filmed with Robbie was being watched through a lens of skepticism. Robbie knew that no matter how well he performed, some people would never separate him from the controversy. Still, they kept going, traveling the back roads, visiting collectors, and telling the stories that once made the show so beloved. There was a quiet determination in both men to honor the past while keeping the spirit of American Pickers alive. By 2025, rumors swirled about possible format changes or even the show's end. Some claimed the network was considering a new spin-off or shorter seasons. Others speculated that Robbie might step back to focus on his businesses in Iowa. Yet through it all, Robbie remained steady. He wasn't chasing fame. He was fulfilling a promise to keep his brother's dream alive and to continue celebrating America's hidden treasures. And maybe that's the part most viewers forget. Robbie never asked to be the replacement or the villain. He simply stepped in when the show was falling apart. He didn't betray Frank. He just happened to arrive at the wrong moment, in the middle of pain and misunderstanding. When you strip away the rumors, the ratings talk, and the online outrage, what's left is a simple truth. 3 men once shared a passion for finding history in forgotten places. Life pulled them in different directions, through injury, addiction, pride, and tragedy. Frank's passing closed one chapter, but it didn't erase what they'd built together. Today, when Robbie walks into a barn filled with antiques, the echoes of the past still follow him. He knows fans are watching, comparing, judging, but he also knows that the joy of discovery hasn't changed. The smell of old wood, the thrill of uncovering a forgotten story, the respect for craftsmanship, those things remain. And perhaps that's where redemption lies. Because in the end, American Pickers was never really about who stood in front of the camera. It was about what they stood for, preserving history, honoring memories, and connecting generations through stories of the past. Robbie Wolfe, for all the criticism he's faced, continues to live that mission. He may never escape the shadow of Frank Fritz, and American Pickers may never recapture the innocence of its early years. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the real legacy of the show is learning how fragile and how human those connections truly are. So when people ask, what really happened to Robbie Wolfe? The answer isn't scandal or conspiracy. It's a story of family, friendship, loss, and resilience. It's the story of a man who stepped into an impossible role, trying to hold together something millions of people loved. And despite everything, every rumor, every insult, every unfair comparison, Robbie keeps going, he keeps picking. He keeps restoring, he keeps remembering, and for those who still tune in, that's enough to prove that American Pickers, though changed forever, still has a heart beating beneath the dust and the drama